If you've ever asked the universe for some kind of sign and got it clear as day, what was it and how did it go? All my life, whenever I went to the beach I had wanted to find an intact sand dollar. I had found lots of pieces, but never a whole one. When I was in my mid-30s, I went with a group of friends to the coast. I was walking alone along the beach and the moonlight close to midnight. I was feeling very sorry for myself in the dark, and really lonely, even though I was with my friends that weekend. I had just started thinking the thought, wouldn't it be a great sign right now to know that I'm loved if I finally found a sand dollar? I had barely formed the thought when I looked down, and right at my feet was an intact sand dollar. My then girlfriend was having a really awful week. I felt terrible for her, which made me realize how serious our relationship was because empathy is not a strong suit of mine. She wanted to take a trip to the Grand Tetons to clear her head. She wanted to see a moose on this trip, but it was August, so relatively unlikely since they tend to move to higher elevations that time of year. I had never seen a moose in the wild. Before we left, I thought if we see a moose on this whirlwind 72-hour road trip I will take it as a sign I should marry this girl. Sure enough, right in the middle of the day, on one of the busiest trails in the park, is a great big bull moose hanging out in the lake. Married 5 years this year. I decided to kill myself about the age of 13. Life sucked, and I planned to go home from church that night and off myself if there was no direct intervention. Out of nowhere my aunt stopped me and said, I feel like you need to come home with me, and I'm still here. Dambish. I really don't like my job, and I've been daydreaming about what I could do. I just needed a place to be able to do it. The next day I get offered to house sit for a couple years in this big Japanese house that has a storefront in the front. There's a perfect space to do what I would want to do. I would live rent free and be able to save up to buy my own business visa here. I wouldn't need to work in this job anymore. Had to choose between MCDS and Taco Bell. I flipped a coin and chose MCDS. Friend got TB and had food poisoning. I was in the depths of despair. I had lost my great job, had to travel 2 hours every day with heavy tools each way to a temporary job I was doing. Sitting on the bus, thinking my world was over, and it all kind of got to me all at once, and I began to tear up. Not wanting to bawl my eyes out in public, I held it in. So I asked for something, anything that could show me that life wasn't worthless. A lady I didn't see must have how bad I was, or maybe it was just coincidence, but just after I cried out in my head, I heard the words, everything is going to be okay. It saved my life. Edit. I had no idea that this would affect you all so much. Sometimes it might be dark and a small spark starts a fire. Sometimes you're the small spark. Be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you for the awards too. I can now give awards to others. Lottery tickets. I was always curious about lottery tickets, but never wanted to indulge in it. One day in a grocery store, I told the universe, I'm going to buy a lotto ticket now, not the grand bumper ones. Just a simple scratch one. For the first time in life, if I win a prize, I'll take it as a sign from you and never buy it again. I bought a ticket for $3, scratched it and won $500. I smiled and donated $250 of the amount. Enjoyed some good food multiple times with the other $250. Never bought or looked at a lottery ticket again. Will never do. I had asked the universe for a sign of good and friendly people really existing out in this world. I know, it's kinda stupid, but I have struggled with making friends that weren't toxic, and I felt like I just wasn't destined to have great friends. About 2 days after I had asked for a sign, I went to my local park to do my daily routine of sitting down, smoking my cigarettes, and reading, and for some strange reason, a pair of strangers came up to me and introduced themselves. We ended up talking with each other for what felt like hours, and eventually, I had asked them why they came up to me, and the guy said, oh, we made a deal to see if we could make any new friends, and we did. You're a new friend. After, we all walked and got some cookies and ice cream and chilled again by the river this time. They both are now my closest friends, and it all started because I was at the right place and at the right time for them to come up to me. I strongly believe that it was the universe's doing, and I'm so grateful for it. Edit. I've had some questions about how exactly I attracted my friends. I changed my thoughts and my feelings about myself and those around me. I began to become a more happier version of myself and thought of myself as a fun and happy person. I also began to feel the emotions of gratitude and happiness, and I would thank the universe for all the good things in my life. Remember, your thoughts and feelings are what create your future, and the universe knows nothing more but to attract to you what you attract to it. I hope this helps. Edit 2. I have told my friends about me asking the universe for new friends that would support and love me regardless, and they said that they had in a way done the same thing. My friends had wanted to make new friends for a while. They had actually made a deal that they would go up and try and make friends. It just happened to be that I was the first person they met and ended up being the person they had hoped to meet. I guess all I can say is just have belief and faith in the universe. Don't worry about how you will make the friends you want. Just believe that you already have them in your life and they will come. By asking for a sign, you're almost daring the universe to show that it is really looking out for you, and the universe will always respond, just in a way that you won't expect. Best of luck to all of you, my friends. I wish you nothing but the best. This wasn't really asking for a sign, but I was going through a lot and in a really crappy and dark place. Like the kind of place I honestly wasn't sure I'd survive. I was teetering on the edge of despair and genuinely going down the path towards doing something insanely drastic. I basically just asked the universe for help one day while in the middle of another crying episode, and I had this strange, sunny feeling kind of leak into the darkness I was harboring inside of me. The next day, by chance, I met my group of friends on a video game I played regularly at the time. They lived in an entirely different city and had entirely different lives from me, but we all just clicked. It took a month or two for me to settle into that friendship and understand that they were gonna stick around. And they've been my best friends for 3 years now. Some of my best memories are from that first summer that I knew them. I genuinely don't think I would have survived that time in my life had I not met them. I was feeling incredibly alone, and I was trying to come to terms with a lot of things all at once. I'm infinitely grateful for them, and I can't help but think that the universe was listening that day when, as a last-ditch effort, I asked it for help. I was in a bad time of my life. I grew up quite naive and I'd like to say sheltered, so when my first boyfriend broke up with me, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. He was my first, and I took it very seriously, so it made it 1000x worse for me. I already had depression, but this knocked me onto suicidal territory. I wasn't sleeping, lost 20 pounds BC, I wouldn't eat. I felt sickly, weak, and just didn't want to be here anymore. I felt like no one cared. I just wanted someone to hold me and tell me that it'll be okay. I like to drive and blast my music when I'm upset to unwind. So I started to drive on the highway and I decided I was finally going to end it. A few minutes before I was going to gear my car off the highway into the lining of trees, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw an ambulance driving behind me. I had never seen an ambulance on the highway that didn't have its signal going, and immediately broke down and cried. The ambulance was just cruising behind me. I took that as a sign that the universe did care and that I was significant. So I drove home to my mother and told her I needed help. I was taken to the hospital, put on medication, and went to therapy for my underlying issues and depression. A year and a half later I'm off medication, no longer needing therapy, and currently thriving. That ambulance truly saved me that day. I got home from my best friend's funeral, the whole time sitting in the funeral home asking him or God for a sign. When I got home I turned on the TV, and his favorite song was playing on Much Music. I'm not superstitious at all, but my uncle is. When my nan passed he went to see a fortune teller who told him that anytime our family sees white feathers around, that's nan's way of showing us that she's there. I thought it was a load of bullcrap and forgot about it. A few years later I was at a music festival. Everything was coated in dirt and dust being churned up by thousands of people's feet. Even the air was so thick with dust it was making it hard to see and breathe. I was on the edges of the mosh pit when I started to have my first panic attack. I'd never had one before. Didn't know what was happening to me, and I was terrified. I felt like I was being crushed, and like I was the only person in the world at the same time. I remember desperately thinking, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be here alone. I crouched down in the middle of the dirty dusty crown, and when I opened my eyes there was a single white feather on the ground right between my feet. It was perfectly white. No dirt. Not stepped on or anything in a mosh pit. I stared at the feather until I could get my breathing under control and get out of there, and I still have that feather. Edit. Thank you for the award, kind stranger. For anyone asking, the festival was southbound in Western Australia. Sadly it's no longer running. I was walking what would have been a 4-hour drive, and I was walking. I straight up begged for a car to stop and pick me up, and literally seconds later a woman stopped who was traveling all the way to where I was heading. Same town. 4 hours away. What are those odds? My wife and I had been considering getting a second cat for some time without reaching any conclusion. Then, as I was walking back to the apartment one evening, a young feline popped up out of the drainage beside the sidewalk. Basically, he just looked at me and said, "Let's cut to the chase. I'll be moving in with you now. You need a cat. I'm a very cute, completely adorable kitten. The only problem I see here is that you might not be smart enough to recognize this opportunity. Be your best self right now, dude." So I looked at him and said, "I can't make this decision solo. Let me go get the wife." He just looked at me and nodded his head like, "Go on. I'll wait." Considering that she just decided that today was cat bath day, he may be regretting the decision. But I'm completely okay with the way things have gone over the past years. I had gotten a job at a retail store and went in for the orientation and to do training. The vibe was kind of off in the store, but I ignored it. I got to the back where the computers were, but couldn't shake the feeling of being uncomfortable. In my head I said, "Alright universe, if I'm not meant to work here, show me some kind of sign. Make them send me home for the day or something." About an hour later, a huge storm rolled in and shut off the power in the store. The manager came in and said for me to go home since their computers weren't working and I couldn't do my training. A couple months later, and I was working at a new job that I absolutely love. I was 18 years old, recently graduated from high school and basically being forced to attend cosmetology school by my stepmom, while also working a full-time job. I was exhausted all the time. My stepmom and I were very religious for a long time, but I was starting to question my faith and stop making church a priority. This caused a lot of drama, and I think resentment, from her and my father who worked out of the country. While attending cosmetology school I had made friends, and was so starved for any sort of friendship and I guess even affection I would tell them the things I hated about my home life. They helped me start to see how toxic my parents and situation was. I knew I had to move out. I tried to do so amicably, but to no avail. In fact, my attempts to leave peacefully backfired and caused more problems. At the time, being religious, I prayed for a way out, but my prayers rarely were answered, so I grew hopeless. A few weeks later, after a rough few days between me and my stepmom, things came to a head one night and she called my father. They had threatened 4 years to kick me out. I was a seriously well-behaved kid, so I was always the one to apologize for whatever they thought I did that was so horrible. This particular night, when the threat entered the air, I saw it as a sign and a fleeting opportunity. I packed my things and was gone the next day. It's been 4 years and I'm now living in a different state with my husband and daughter, and our second child is due to be born in about a month. My son passed away and I sat at the kitchen table in shock. I couldn't really believe he was gone. I asked him to send me a sign so I'd know he was still with us, in spirit if not in body. A few minutes later all the lights in the house went out. I didn't believe it was him, so I even checked the fuse box. I almost called an electrician, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was just the lights. The power points still worked, so I could cook, and the fridge was on. It stayed that way for 2 days, until I eventually said, okay, I know it's you, and they came back on. I was so overwhelmed with grief at the time. This seemed like nothing, but now I see how crazy it was. I get this might be hard for some people to believe, but I really don't care if anyone believes it or not. I just needed to know he was somewhere else besides in the ground, because he was only in his 20s and it just wasn't fair he was gone so young. You should never outlive your children. Wife was insisting I work the garden on my day off. I begrudgingly started, but said to her, if it rains I'm out. Right on cue there was a huge clap of thunder and lightning strike up on the hill about 2 miles away. I did a little robot shutdown dance and Dad moonwalked back into the house. My mother passed away when I was a baby, so I have no memories of her, and my dad rarely talks about her as it was very painful for him. I had a very abusive childhood and don't really speak to my family much, so I'm very much an independent loner. In a moment of weakness seeking support, I asked the universe and my mother for guidance and that if she really is there watching over me to wake me up at exactly 3:33 am that night. She proved she was there for me that night. Woke up randomly at exactly 3:33 am. I found more strength that night and I continue to seek ways of connecting with her. I just spoke to the universe and said some things. Got on Reddit to distract me from a troubled mind. And I find a question like this right on top. How's that for some cherry pie? Walking to my car to go smoke weed with some friends and I asked the universe if this should be the last time I smoke. Turned on the car, radio goes on. Freaking Tom Petty Last Dance with Mary Jane. What are the chances right? Wasn't my last dance. I'd been unhappy in my line of work for some time. I had been reading some self-help books, I'm not religious, called Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsh. It talked about the universe reflecting your thoughts, words and actions directly back at you. That is, wanting a career change results in a reality of wanting a career change. There was a message about being and not doing. So I wanted to test this with an experiment, as it all sounded a bit mumbo jumbo. So I volunteered in a special needs youth club, so I could be and give what I wanted the universe to reflect back at me. This led to a job as a support worker for special needs in a college, which led to completing a distance learning degree, which led to teacher training, which led to being a graduate lecturer, which led to deputy management of a whole faculty and ultimately a career helping hundreds of people each year. I have continued to practice this creating your own reality philosophy of being through thoughts, speech and actions. The number of times it works cannot be just luck. Believing in luck is just as far-fetched if you really think about it. X. Coming out for the very first time. I was really, unnecessarily, nervous. It was to a good friend of mine, and I saw him walking around with rainbow socks. Then I knew I would be fine. So after 5 minutes of awkward stumbling I said that I'm B, and he just replied with a smooth "oh me too lol." Once while walking to work as a teenager I asked God to show me a sign if I should get out of my relationship, abusive ex, and just as I finished the prayer a fish came flying out of nowhere and smacked me in the face. I went down and blacked out for a second, and when I came to there were these 3 hillbilly men surrounding me, fanning me, and just generally freaking out. When they realized I was awake they just started apologizing and said they swore they had put the strap on their cooler. They gave me some ice for my eye and walked me down to work so I could call my mom to pick me up. I broke up with my ex the next day out of fear of being smacked by a rogue fish again. After reading this thread, a group hug is needed. When I was a teenager I had bad problems with depression and anxiety that led to very self-destructive behavior. There were many times I imagined killing myself, and one night I was set on doing it. Came home wasted and sad and started cutting myself, which was one of my methods for dealing with my emotions. I sat in my bed crying, trying to find the courage to cut deeper and end it. Then my dog Snippy hopped up on the bed and put his head on my lap. Thanks to him doing that I realized that I just couldn't do that to him or to my parents and friends. He saved my life that night. The next day I decided to open up to my parents and ask them to help me find some help, which was a huge step forward. Starting seeing a therapist and she really helped me work through a lot of things. Still struggle a bit sometimes, but I'm able to manage thanks to the help I received, and I credit that little lovable mutt for me being around today. So I was going to the mall when my sister said wait up, and while she was getting ready it started raining. And there was a mall shooting that day. During one of the lowest points of my life, I often drove around for hours listening to music, not telling anyone where I was or where I was going. On one of these drives, I was trying to motivate myself into finally seeking some help, or at least talking to people I knew about how deeply depressed I was, and to stop naively driving around without telling anyone where I was going, because it was reckless. I was thinking something like, I don't know what to do anymore. God, please give me a sign or something. When the song Snap Out of It by the Arctic Monkeys came on, I remember because I was annoyed that it played twice, even though I had a playlist on shuffle. I was driving through a side road in the woods at this time, and the road was getting really narrow and muddy. On a tight and very muddy turn, I lost control of my car and was sliding off the road straight towards a huge tree. Fortunately, my car stopped sliding just in time. I stared around, and after realizing how close I came to a possibly fatal accident, I broke down crying. I stopped disappearing on everyone after that, because I realized there were people who truly cared about me and wanted to help. I was looking up at the night sky and said, Dad, show me a shooting star, and one shot across the sky. He had passed a few years earlier, and it was purely coincidental, but I really needed it at the time. Years ago I had lost my job. I was doing a lot of temp and part-time gigs, but there would be dry spells where I couldn't find anything. I like to go on long walks, just around the city or down by the lake, maybe through a park. Just be by myself thinking about life and what to do next. I'd talk with myself, have conversations with the universe. I'd ask, do I really have a shot at pulling my life together? Everything is so messed up. Will I find some meaning, some direction, or am I cursed to just wander lost till I'm eventually hit by a car or struck by lightning or caught in a fire? If that's my fate, why not get it over with? Either that or give me some hope to believe in. Well, a few weeks later I got my answer. I was hit by a car. I kept mine open-ended. I wanted a reason for being alive. No response yet. So a pretty materialistic one, but okay. Huge Borderlands fan. Wanted Borderlands 3 so bad, but had to wait for it to go to Steam. Still expensive as hell. Was discussing with my mate and literally said, I need the universe to give me a sign to treat myself. 10 minutes later got the email that the game is 50% off. When I was in the army back in 2002 I was fresh out of BMQ, and I found out my ex, like every other 18-year-old Boots ex, was cheating on me. I got home, and I got custody of our kid. Why, I joined the army, and I asked the universe right then for a sign. I was like, give me a sign, if I should forgive her, or if I should move on, and lo and behold, prayers answered. While driving along the highway, I looked out the window and there is a sign of a First Nations park that is done in a First Nations style art, and it's in the shape of a sun, almost the exact tattoo she had told me she wanted many times. I took this as a attempt at the universe teaching me to be compassionate and understanding. This woman reconciled with me. We fell in love again. Frick like you wouldn't believe, and every day I have to tell the universe that it can go frick itself. I regret listening to it almost. She immediately drained my bank account and wrecked my car and gave me crabs. Never stop cheating. I took this as proof that the universe hates me and was like, haha, frick you. We've been at odds since. This is cross-posted from another sub. So, when succulents became the craze, I bought a few. I panicked because they weren't happy and overwatered all of them. The pots I had didn't have proper drainage either. The poor things all drowned. Around the same time, changes were made at work, nursing home, that made it very hard to properly care for everyone. One of the people affected was Flash Gordon, not his real name. He was dying, and he was my friend. He made me promise not to quit until after he died, as I was the only one patient enough with his grumpy ass. When he passed I couldn't stop crying at work. Someone grabbed this little guy from his room and began overwatering it at the nurse's station. I then decided that, since I couldn't save Flash, I'd save the succulent. Almost a year passes. I've stayed and kept all my promises. But I'm miserable. Administration doesn't do crap. And people are suffering. I'm no longer effective because my mental health is severely suffering. I didn't want to abandon them, and I was ready to set myself ablaze to keep them warm. Finally, I asked the universe for a sign that I should leave. The next morning I wake up, and this little guy had a huge stalk I apparently hadn't noticed. There were blossoms all throughout. A tear ran down my cheek. I thanked Flash, and put in my 2 weeks. Best decision I ever made. I have a wonderful job, a baby on the way, and peace. In January I expressed to a colleague it would be amazing to have a few months off to just do nothing but rest and recharge. He said it would be good for me, but not so good for my colleagues. I said okay, I want us all to have a few months off to rest and recharge. Without the shop permanently closing, we can all come back when we've had a good rest. Then this lockdown has happened. I was 15 when I moved out of my mom's house. I was making a real effort to reconnect with friends after depression/suicidal tendencies had driven me away from them, and was making real strides after leaving my abusive home. Talking to people, being near people at all, was a real struggle. One morning just before class started, a friend of mine walked past, and even though I was usually super paranoid about being late to class, I stopped him and talked to him for a bit. Turns out he had just that morning broken up with his girlfriend, who none of us knew was very cruel and manipulative. He had been with her for years, and it took a lot for him to do that. I gave him a hug, which was crazy cause I usually hated being touched, and told him he would find the right person, that he deserved better. Well, somehow, it turns out he thinks I'm the right person. We've been together almost 10 years now, and I can't imagine being without him. Not sure I believe in signs or whatever, but that day I did something way out of character and it's paid off ever since. I was feeling depressed and lonely after a rough breakup on top of problems at home. I just asked the universe if there was anyone out there who could actually love a messed up person like me. A few days later, I met my now fiance because he wanted to know what I was sketching. We now live together and are still as dorky as the day we met. I was about to jump from the bucket I was standing on with a rope around my neck, silently praying for any reason for staying to pop into my head. A very big, almost angry, unexpected gust of wind ripped through the woods I was in, and that scared me out of it. Ironically, I slipped trying to get down but also defied physics and literally got back up on my feet. Thanks random wind. About a year ago I was without a steady job and tackling work as a background actor. Finding work can be inconsistent, and as a non-union the pay isn't top tier. It was fine as acting is really the career I want to be in, but what wasn't fine was the instability. I only had so much money for my bills and expenditures. Constantly on the brink of broke. Had credit card debt. All that financial misery. Before that I was working in manufacturing warehouses, which was steady and simple. However, it was absolutely miserable work to me. Tedious handiwork. Constant standing and lifting of heavy things. Being scrutinized every day even when doing above and beyond. And absolutely no free time. I'd left that work behind when I chose to finally take acting. But the financial hardship was starting to drive me back to the stability of full-time jobs grudgingly. I had one job lined up as a warehouse employee again, and was finishing up a call with a representative to start the onboarding process. All that time, while I was on the phone, I was just thinking about the monotony of this line of work, and the fact that if I took the job I'd turn my back on what I really wanted to do, and could possibly be stuck in a dead-end job. It got me thinking to myself about the good times I'd had working on different sets, going to far out areas I'd never been to, and the happiness I got from jobs I actually enjoyed. When I came out of it, I thought to myself, you know what? I'll take the job if I have to, but if I get a call for even just one background job, I'm just gonna stick out the waiting. This was during the end of the dry season of filming. Not even 10 minutes later I got a call for not one, but multi-day jobs. Enough to not only keep me stable, but get me above the debts I was getting in. So I declined the warehouse job, stuck with acting, worked at it with a more determined mindset, and by the end of the year I was able to join a union with no more debt and more stability than where I was at the year before. TL, doctor, starving artist debates returning to warehouse job, sticks with acting, and gets good with it.